Welcome to Tech Leaders Today with your host, Cassie Crossley. All comments, views, and opinions expressed on this show are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers. Now here's Cassie Crossley.
Welcome to Tech Leaders Today. I'm Cassie Crossley, and today I'm with Bill Michalski. He is the Chief Solutions Officer of ArrowStream. As the Chief Solutions Officer, Bill leads product management, product development, and marketing, driving all go-to-market initiatives in new technology innovation. Welcome, Bill.
Thanks.
Can you tell me more about what ArrowStream does and what you specifically do there? It sounds like you have quite a number of hats.
Sure. Yes, I do. ArrowStream is a technology company that works in the restaurant chain industry. And we support customers who are restaurant chains themselves, as well as distributors and manufacturers that are providing food service products. What we do is leverage data to build a centralized data platform for the food service industry and use that to solve a whole host of different challenges for those parties. So it starts with supply chain visibility, but we use that to help make sure that there is pricing accuracy across the supply chain, that inventory levels are being monitored appropriately, that promotions that are going on are being managed well. It also extends into areas like food safety and quality.
Okay, well, I definitely have more questions on how you do that. We'll cover that in the second half, but you must have some technology folks working for you. Where are you located, by the way?
Sure, we're in downtown Chicago.
Oh, okay. And in that market, that's a very tough market because there are a lot of technology firms. Can you tell me what it's like to attract and retain talent in Chicago?
Yeah, we do have an in-house development team that's located here in Chicago. And Chicago is kind of a blessing and a curse in that it's a fantastic technology hub here in the Midwest. What that means is that we have a strong community of developers and other people related to technology, but who are also in very high demand. We are competing with a lot of other firms for good talent. You know, that's, I think, a struggle for any technology company, but we're in a pretty good position as far as that goes, just based on the kind of company we are and what we do. It demands that we stay kind of connected to that community. And so there are a number of organizations here in Chicago that we leverage to make sure that we're at top of mind as developers become available. You know, as I think about it, about how we retain people as well as hire new people, a lot of it comes down to how we work day to day in the office. I think that, there's a little bit of a cliche right now that what's important to millennials and Gen Z, et cetera, is lifestyle, right? More than compensation. But I think that lifestyle is kind of the wrong word for it because it makes it sound, not very deep. But in fact, I think really what attracts people in technology these days is the mission. I think people want to work somewhere where they feel that they're building something and have a purpose. It doesn't need to be something that's going to change the world, but it needs to have integrity, right? They need to feel like they're building a good product that does what it says it does, that makes people's lives a little bit better. In order to retain people and also to attract people, because I think people kind of sense this even when they just step into an office, you've got to make sure that you're conducting yourself with that integrity in mind. It gets to questions about, do you actually care about user experience, right? Do you care about the little things that make your customers want to use your product or enjoy using your product? From a technologist standpoint, are you actually paying attention to technical debt? The things that kind of grow and potentially fester behind the technology, are you addressing those and keeping it up to date in your technology stack? These are the kinds of things that lead to an environment that I guess I would say has integrity, and that's what people are looking for.
Are you located in central Chicago or one of the suburbs?
Right downtown. We're right near the Board of Trade building here, so lots of traders kind of roaming around, but it makes it for a pretty vibrant environment.
And when you're searching for those technologists, are you generally looking for people with several years experience or university graduates or a mixture? What's the makeup of your teams?
I always think it's great to have a mixture. You certainly want to have some seasoned developers on your team because there are things that frankly just take years to learn. They go beyond any given technology and how it's utilized, but get to just best practices. But then it's great to have new blood as well, people who are just entering on the scene, who might be paying attention to technology in a different way, or even kind of represent a different type of user because certainly these days, people are entering the workforce who have a different life experience with technology than, say, I did when I first came in.
When you're hiring people, do you require any kind of background, or is it an advantage to have a background in anything in the restaurant industry? I know in college and high school, I was in restaurant work and familiar with a bit of it, not all of the supply chain, but definitely some of the food safety and inventory aspects.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. It seems like most people somewhere in their background had some experience working right with the restaurant community. I mean, I come from a technology background, but if I go back to high school, at some point I was a dishwasher. So that touch point is familiar for a lot of people. From our standpoint, from a hiring standpoint, the food service industry is a little different than a lot of industries. Actually, it's very different in a lot of ways, but one way in which it's different, it's really just kind of catching up now to some other industries when it comes to the technologies that are available. I think most people think of supply chain operations from what they learn from the way that retail works, where there's tremendous visibility up and down the supply chain. That's a relatively new phenomenon in food service. And I bring that up because in the context of this question, in that it's very important for us to make sure that we are bringing technologists into our organization who can help that industry evolution, right, by bringing ideas and insights from other industries into this one. I like personally having a good mix of backgrounds. It's always nice to have some experience in food service in various capacities in our company as well. But from a pure development standpoint, I'm willing to go into a lot of areas.
On the side of technology, you mentioned all the different areas that your company and its offering include. That is a pretty wide variety from supply chain all the way to food safety. It seems almost like specific segments within your company. How do you address those just at the product management level first?
That's a great question. And it actually speaks to something that we had to grapple with in our software for many years, because we built this great platform of data that really was unmatched in the food service industry, where we had insight into all the transactions that flow through distribution out to the restaurant, inventory levels of distributors, sales transactions, what have you, and insight, frankly, into all those products also that are being moved. But what you can do with that data is great and varied. And so we had a product that we kept adding this process, that visibility, this metric, this problem to be solved within the tool. And it was difficult after a while to think of the product as a single thing. But then what we did several years ago was completely remake the way that we were delivering insights from that data. We built this tile-based interface that does the work of mining all that information and bubbling up to the surface for our customers what they should be paying attention to in their supply chain today. And so if I log in as a customer, on a single screen, I'll see that I have a quality issue over here, or I have a promotion going on where a key item is about to run out of stock at this distribution center in Texas. At the same time, I may have pricing that needs to get updated on 15 of my contracts, and I've only got 1 day left, and so I need to engage with my suppliers to make sure I've got my new pricing entered. And all this is coming into one place. So it's solving a lot of different problems, as you say, but we're bringing it all together because ultimately the people who are solving all those different problems are solving all of them. I think a lot of people don't realize just how small some of the companies are who manage the brands that they visit every day. Major restaurant chains that everyone knows about sometimes only have a handful of people managing their entire supply chain and their purchasing and their quality management.
In this dashboard that you display to the users, is it structured so that they can configure it and be able to assess what their key indicators are, or is there implementation that you put in place before you deploy it to them? How does that work?
Yeah, it's very much configurable. So because we're building this out in this tile format, they can pick and choose the tiles that are important to them to see. And over time, we've been building out a wider and wider library of those. And so there are more and more to choose from. And in the end, the users wind up constructing their own particular view of the world. We might have a user at a restaurant chain that has 6 critical items that they want to make sure that they never even come close to running out of stock in. And so they may have a tile, right, that does nothing but monitor the inventory levels across all distribution locations of those items and will alert them if there's any problem. but that might not be something that the user at another chain is paying attention to. Their concern right now has more to do with auditing the pricing of invoices that appear at their restaurants to make sure that they're paying exactly the right amount every day and that their contracts are in sync with the pricing that's in the distributor systems. They might have that tile set up.
Are they determining what analytics are important to them, or do you help guide them? Do you have specialists that are working on those analysis and what they need to do to go forward?
Well, that is really at the core of the shift that we undertook with this new interface, because it used to be that we would collect all this data and we'd make it available to our customers in the form of a business intelligence environment where they could slice and dice it and build the reports that they wanted. We still have that in the tool set, but what we discovered is that the expectations of the industry were changing. And I think part of this is the industry, part of it is, frankly, the demographic of people working in these environments. These days, no one wants to go mining data. They expect our technology to mine it for them. And so what that means is that we need to bring to bear all the expertise that we've built up over the years of working with all these different restaurant chains to lead them a little bit. So here are the things that we think you should be paying attention to. Doesn't mean that you can't still go in and slice and dice and build the report you want, because they and the end are experts in their particular business. But what we've done is we've become experts in the industry, and so we can provide a lot of guidance on that front.
Are you using any machine learning or plan to in the future?
Yes, we're digging into that a little bit. So at the core of our data management, in order to have this data repository that can serve multiple parties in the food supply chain, it means that you need to map that information into language that makes sense for each party. To explain what I mean, imagine that you're working at a restaurant chain, like a Jamba Juice, and you've got an item in your view of the world that is frozen strawberries. Well, your supply chain team might be purchasing those frozen strawberries from 5 different suppliers, and they're flowing through 10 different distribution centers represented by maybe 4 distributors. And I'm not saying that's exactly what's happening at Jamba Juice. I'm just making this up. But every one of those parties, the manufacturer, the distributor, the chain itself, has different ways of looking at that item, different IDs. And so by the time you collect data from all those parties and mash it together, none of it looks the same. It's all got different item descriptions, different attributes. And so what has to happen is it all needs to get mapped together so that all they have to do is say, I want to look at my frozen strawberries, and they get all that information. To do that requires a certain level of automation as well as exception-based manual intervention. And so that's an area in which we're applying some machine learning capabilities.
So you mentioned chain, and that was leading me to my next question. It's actually a 2-part question. Have you been working with any blockchain, or do you see that advancing? I hope so, in your industry. And then secondly, what do you do with the very small companies that are providing farm-to-table type of produce or anything like that? Because I'm sure restaurant chains with your variety of customers are working with very small growers in some cases.
In the end, the food service industry, and specifically restaurant chains, are very varied, right, in size and scope. The manufacturers are different sizes. The chains themselves, we're working with chains that have thousands of restaurants and chains that have just a handful, who are just emerging chains. Some of them may not even really think of themselves as a restaurant chain yet. They're really just a restaurant with several locations. We have to have solutions that are meaningful to all those parties, and we have to be able to manage the data in a way that makes sense for them. Fortunately, the way the industry is structured is that a lot of product that makes its way to these restaurants comes through a distributor. That industry is pretty well consolidated. You do have your smaller distribution centers out there, but a lot of the volume in the industry flows through the top 15 or so distributors. And we have very strong relationships with all of those distributors and get feeds from all of them. So we have feeds representing, I think it's over 700 DC locations across the United States. We're able to take a chain that might be very small and a supplier that might be very small who's supplying them and still be able to get 100% of their data because we can get it from the distribution center. From a usage standpoint, sometimes their needs are different, right? If I'm a restaurant chain with thousands of locations, I have certain operations that I'm paying attention to at a different level than a chain might if they have 5 locations. Right, a chain with 5 locations is pretty much just focused on building their menu, right? Making sure that their restaurants are operating efficiently and selecting the right suppliers to supply their ingredients.
And is the industry doing blockchain? Anything that's advancing on that topic?
It really has not made it yet into the food service space. There are some organizations certainly that are addressing the need for standardization in terms of item information as it flows through the supply chain. You may have heard of GS1, and a lot of that grew out of the coming stringency of regulations around food safety. You're going to trace product all the way from farm to fork, so that if there's a product recall, you know exactly where to go get it. You need to have standard nomenclature for that item up and down the supply chain.
Yep, and that's exactly what I was envisioning is you want to alert those restaurants the ability to not just say, here's a lot number, but say, we delivered it to you on this day. It was this information. Please pull it because there's a recall. That's fantastic that you can get that into the hands of the restaurants themselves.
Yeah, now traceability, I mean, that's obviously a big topic and an important topic today within food service. What's happening in the industry around that is very interesting, right? Because you've had a lot of public attention on it through various incidents that have occurred. You've had governmental attention to it with the Food Safety and Modernization Act, which is kind of slowly being rolled out and making its way through the restaurant chain industry. But what's happening in the industry right now is that the realities of data availability are running into the demands for food safety and traceability. There are a lot of companies right now trying to figure out how it is that they're going to achieve that full traceability given the data accessibility that they do not have, because it requires not only common nomenclature for items up and down the supply chain, but from an operations standpoint, right? All those items have to be given intelligent barcodes so that they can be scanned throughout the supply chain. Then the scanning actually has to take place. That information needs to be collected. It's a challenge that the industry is still grappling with. As a technology company that works off of food service data, we're sitting right in the middle of that. We have a kind of a different perspective on traceability in that we believe that it starts with transactional visibility. Typically what happens when people are talking about traceability is they jump right to lot code visibility. I want to know exactly where this lot of product was at what point in time, which is what you want, ideally. But since we work in the industry every day, we know that the timetable to get to full lot level visibility is long. What you need to be able to do in the meantime is fill in the gaps with information that comes from invoices to the restaurants or purchase orders to the supplier or advanced shipment notices from the supplier. And so we are already collecting and housing all of that data. And so as we approach traceability, the way we're building it is that we will take in those lot level scans where we can get them, but we'll fill in the gaps with all of the other information so that we can show with a certain degree of confidence where the given items were at what point in time. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. I really think that how everything's being digitized and put together, you're going to be connecting the dots that weren't connected before. There was that loss of where it ends up, and there's just a lot of breaks in the chains. And now that your software and companies that are really taking this data to a whole new level, it's pretty important. And it's really a game changer for the industry itself.
Absolutely.
Since you are a software as a service, tell me about your backbone and infrastructure. Are you doing releases all the time? I'm assuming your data center is probably somewhere pretty close and local. What is your setup on that?
I guess starting on the data security side, obviously that is of primary importance. I mean, not only to us, really to any multi-tenant SaaS software provider. Keeping the integrity of data access is vital. You know, we work with a top-tier data center. We operate in a private cloud with kind of primary production facility and backup as well to maintain consistency of uptime. You know, I think like many companies working in a SaaS model, we run an agile development process. Long ago moved away from major releases on a quarterly or semi-yearly basis or what have you. So we run a 2-week sprint cycle. So we're updating our production environment with enhancements every 2 weeks. Sometimes they're enhancements that customers don't necessarily see. Sometimes they're more major. Sometimes we're releasing them and keeping them depermissioned until the point when we enable permissions for our customers. What that effectively enables us to do is roll out updates to the product as soon as we and our customers are ready, and not based on kind of an artificial timetable. We've built our whole development team around that. We run all our developers sit kind of commingled with product, with business analysts, with QA, with user experience designers. It's a little bit like a kind of a DevOps model so that they can all communicate well, and we can manage our sprints very efficiently.
Are there any other initiatives or exciting projects that you're working on right now?
There are. One of the interesting convergences that's happening with our technology and within our industry is that data accessibility has really come to the forefront within food service. I mentioned earlier that it's not like retail. In retail, manufacturers have had visibility all the way to the end customer for years. And they've built very complex, sophisticated forecasting algorithms and whatnot around that visibility. It's not been the case in the restaurant industry. Between restaurant chains, distributors, suppliers, there's been very little sharing of data and data visibility. But that's all been changing through some of our work, some work of other technology providers as well. And also just through a newfound willingness for a lot of these organizations to share that data, because they understand that value comes back to them. And so what's happening is a very rapid evolution from a technology standpoint within this environment, where you're not just taking data from a single company and playing it back to them in a way that provides insights. You're taking data from across 3, 4, sometimes 5 different business partners and using that to enable cross-partner workflows that weren't available before. So traceability is going to be one of those examples as that develops in the industry, where it touches all parties throughout the supply chain, and they have to effectively act as one business in order to secure the safety of products that are reaching the end consumer. But there are a whole host of other processes that are like that as well. Promotions management is one of them. Historically, what would happen is that a restaurant chain who's running a promotion, and they run more and more of them every year. Promotions are kind of the lifeblood of many restaurant chains. There was a process where, the marketing side of the organization at the chain puts together a forecast of what they think they're going to do, and they plan the menu, and it works its way back in the supply chain. And then as the promotion's going on, the last person to find out that the volume is not what was expected, or the customer demand, is the manufacturer, who's responsible for running these production lines in order to supply that promotional product. And so you get this bullwhip effect in the supply chain. Well, now suddenly we can provide manufacturers direct visibility into inventory levels in the DC, right, and sales out to the restaurants, which means that at the same time a restaurant chain becomes aware that demand in a certain region isn't what they expected, the distributor becomes aware and the manufacturer becomes aware, and they can manage the supply chain so much more efficiently. These are major sea changes in the way that a supply chain can operate, and it's hitting food service now through platforms like ours. And so we're racing to take the data that we have and build more and more of these layers of process enablement across food service.
So you're actually adding another almost user segment. Before you had the restaurant chain, and now you're moving it upstream?
Yes. We're beginning to work with manufacturers as well. We've already been working with distributors for quite some time, but we're moving into the manufacturer community. And as part of that, our technology, we're beginning to leverage the true breadth of our data network in order to build benchmarking and market intelligence about what's happening within the food service space. Our data network has become big enough now that we can use that to provide some value to these parties.
I love what analytics can truly do for everyone throughout the cycle. That's pretty interesting what you guys are working on. What is the best way for people to find out more about ArrowStream?
Well, the first place I would direct them to is our website, which is ArrowStream.com. It talks all about the many things we do within the food service space. Certainly, if you're interested in following us on Twitter, we have our ArrowStream Twitter handle, which is ArrowStream1. Those would be 2 good places to go.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Bill.
Thank you so much. It's been fun.
I want to thank you so much for listening today. If you love this podcast, please do share it with your friends and colleagues, and please leave a review on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher, because it makes a difference for circulation. For the show notes and other great info, enter your email into the mailing list at techleaderstoday.com. Thank you.